My books, The Origin of Names, Words, and Everything in Between, volumes 1 and 2, are available to purchase from most major booksellers in all major formats. Order your copies today so you can enjoy these books for yourself and help support the channel.
Icelandic isn't really the most mobile of languages. While many other tongues have travelled the globe and found homes in new places like French across Africa, English in North America, and Spanish in South America, Icelandic has more or less stayed firmly at home in the nation of Iceland. Across the globe, the language has around 300,000 speakers or so. That's around the population of Reading in the UK. Yeah, you can easily fit the entire Icelandic speaking world into this one commuter city. Of course, most of these speakers reside in the nation of Iceland itself, as no other country on our planet has Icelandic as an official language, though Icelandic can obviously be found outside of Iceland. The Scandinavian countries of Sweden, Norway and Denmark all have a few thousand Icelandic speakers each, and over 40,000 people in the USA have some degree of Icelandic heritage in them. But in these countries, Icelandic immigration is more a case-by-case scenario. People from the country over the years deciding to move for a myriad of reasons, and all settling in different parts of these nations and intermixing with the locals, as opposed to say a large community of people all moving at once and carving out a small part of the country or a city for themselves. Unfortunately, there's no Little Iceland a couple blocks down from Little Italy in New York City or anything like that. Yet there is one country that found itself housing a larger community of Icelandic speakers who did form their own little settlement there, and Icelandic is still spoken there to some extent. That being within the nation of Canada. Canada is actually home to the largest amount of Icelandic speakers outside of the nation of Iceland itself, so much so that the nation, within its huge landmass, does have a small Icelandic community, which is simply dubbed New Iceland, or Nýja Ísland in Icelandic. New Iceland is found in Manitoba, across the southwestern shore of Lake Winnipeg. It's here we find the highest concentration of Icelandic people outside of the nation of Iceland itself, and I just find this remarkably fascinating. I feel many see Iceland as this very closed off, isolated and somewhat mysterious country, so to find out that people from this enigma of a nation have found themselves at home in one of the largest countries on the planet is truly incredible to me. And while Icelandic was undoubtedly the key language of Canada's New Iceland in the past, how much it is spoken here today doesn't seem to be too clear. Undoubtedly, there are people who can speak it, though it doesn't seem to be the sole language here. If you were trekking across Canada today, you wouldn't need to brush up on your Icelandic for this one part of the nation. Seemingly just English will get you by. Though as it's in Manitoba, you may find some French speakers too, as Manitoba does have a French speaking population within it. If you're watching from New Iceland in Canada, please let me know if you speak Icelandic or how widely spoken the language is in the area. Also, hi. From what I can gather about New Iceland, however, my favourite thing about it is the name of its largest settlement. Guys, it's called Gimli. As a Middle-earth nerd, this excited me way too much, but it isn't seemingly named directly after the beloved dwarf. It instead comes from the place of Gimle in Norse mythology, which is often translated into Gimli in Icelandic. This is the place that survivors of Ragnarok would reside in, and is seen as something of a paradise. This is why some sources claim that Gimli simply means paradise in Icelandic. It was most likely named this due to the Icelandic settlers who formed this town, hoping to find their own slice of paradise away from their initial home. I mean, it would be great if it was named after the Gimli, but if there's any solace to be found, it's somewhat likely that Tolkien borrowed this same Old Norse word for the character's name too, so there's probably some relation between them. As much as I would love to be able to just pack my bags and check out the town of Gimli for myself on a whim, I can't really do that. What I can do, however, is check out Google Maps and Street View, which is the next best thing, I guess. As mentioned earlier, it's not like New Iceland is fully Icelandic speaking today. The signs in the town aren't all written in Icelandic, and there's many trappings of modern Canadian life here too, like there's a Subways and even a Tim Hortons of course. But there are clearly parts of this town that directly reference this Icelandic heritage, most noticeably the New Iceland Heritage Museum, and there's literally a statue of a Viking in the town too. On top of this, traditional Icelandic food can be found in the town too, and it even hosts the yearly Icelandic Festival of Manitoba, which celebrates all things Iceland. It's held over the start of August, and from their website the 2024 event sounds like a blast. Go if you're in the area. Though apologies if you're watching this from the future, there's always next time. Gimli, however, isn't the only town settled by Icelanders in New Iceland. There's also the smaller Lunda, Selkirk and Moldon. There's even a nearby river which is literally called the Icelandic River to really hammer home the point. I always adore finding small expat communities in unexpected places, like the Welsh speakers of Argentina in example. And what we have here in Canada is a little nook of Iceland 2,700 plus miles away from Reykjavik. Of course, Icelandic people didn't migrate to Canada for no reason. These travels started brewing in the 19th century. While Iceland now might be one of the happiest countries on earth, that definitely wasn't the case a few hundred years ago. Iceland in the 19th century was a drastically different place. Without the technology and knowledge we have now, it was a very cold and bitter and isolated place. Farming was a huge challenge in these harsh conditions, meaning there was very little trade within the nation, and getting there via boat in the past proved very difficult too, so there was little connection with the outside world. This left the natives of Iceland poor and hungry. It's completely understandable as to why the people of Iceland would want to find some more prosperous land to call their own. The real tipping point for the Icelanders, however, was the eruption of the volcano Askja in 1875, which left a lot of the land covered in smoke and ash, making places uninhabitable. So, from the mid-19th century, people from the country set sail to find somewhere else to call home. And interestingly enough, Canada wasn't actually their first port of call. In 1855, a small group of Icelanders actually migrated to the US state of Utah. This state was chosen as these Icelanders were actually Mormons, and the state of Utah of course has a long history with Mormonism. This seemingly didn't stick around, as there isn't all that much of an Icelandic community in the state today. Though Utah is an incredibly different place to Iceland, that's for sure. Imagine living all your life in 19th century Iceland, with little knowledge of the outside world, only to find the deserts and buttes of Utah. Yet Icelanders also found themselves somewhere even more exotic than Utah to them, as in 1863, another small group from the country found themselves trying to settle in Brazil. Once again, one can only imagine how alien Brazil seemed to Icelanders of the past. This didn't really take off either too, due to just how difficult it was to travel from Iceland to Brazil. The man who really got the ball rolling on Icelandic migration to Canada was one Sigtryggur Jónasson, who has since been dubbed the father of New Iceland. He migrated in 1872 and found Canada an ideal place for the people of Iceland to start a new life. When the aforementioned volcano erupted, he decided to head back to Iceland to convince more people to come to Canada with him, and even saying they could find land they could call their own. Canada itself was more than happy to welcome in these Icelandic migrants. Some took Jónasson up on the offer and they made their way to Canada, selling most of their possessions and property in Iceland to start a new life in a new land. At this time, Canada was huge and sparse, and still is somewhat to this day. This meant the Icelanders had ample land to choose from for their new home, and they had a specific list of requirements they wanted from the new land too. They wanted their land in Canada to be as geographically similar to Iceland as possible, along with good land to farm on, plenty of natural resources to build with, a lake to fish from, isolation from others so their culture and language could thrive without outside influence, and perhaps highest on their list, no natural disasters. Many of these people were fleeing a volcano, so the last thing they wanted was another volcano. Eventually, the land that ticked all these boxes was found in Manitoba at the south of Lake Winnipeg. It was here that New Iceland would be founded. Apparently, there was only one drawback. A huge abundance of grasshoppers lived here. While this was probably annoying, it's seemingly something they could deal with. The town of Gimli itself was founded in 1875, the same year the volcano erupted back in Iceland. Life to begin with was far from easy in New Iceland, which must have been annoying considering they were there to start a new, easier life. In their first years, they experienced harsh winters and smallpox spread across the community. From its inception, New Iceland was actually independent from the rest of Canada, and only Icelandic people were allowed to settle there. This meant that at this time, Icelandic was most definitely the key language of the land. Towards the end of the 19th century though, the region officially became a part of the province of Manitoba. Now it was firmly Canadian land. It meant that the Canadian government could help these people more. Better infrastructure was put in place, and Gimli and New Iceland as a whole thrived a lot more. In my estimates, however, Gimli truly became Canadian in just 2015, as that's when that Tim Hortons opened there. Joking aside, while support from the Canadian government helped this land thrive, it also stifled the Icelandic influence on the land. Now anyone could live there, even if they were not from Iceland in the first place. This had an effect on the language here too, with English seemingly becoming more prominent than Icelandic. But according to Gimli's own website, many can still speak and understand Icelandic, though fewer can read or write the language. So Icelandic does still have a presence there. To many of us, Icelandic might seem like this strange language frozen to a single island, but just like most other languages on our globe, it has travelled and found a new home, even if that new home is just a quiet little nook of Canada.
Name Explain depends on viewers like yourself supporting the channel financially on Patreon, so a huge thank you to everyone who does. Donating just $1 a month helps the channel amazingly and gets you bonuses including ad-free videos, exclusive content, the power to request ideas to be made into actual Name Explain videos, and your name at the end of the video with all these awesome people. Visit patreon.com/NameExplain or click the link down below to find out how you too can support the channel. Thank you. Thanks for reaching the end of the video. Why not watch another and subscribe to keep up to date on all things Name Explain. You can find myself on Instagram where I'm NameExplainYT and join the Facebook group Friends of Name Explain to talk with myself and other name nerds. All that will be linked down below. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and once again, thank you all so much.